Hello there, listeners. You've found us again, haven't you? But do you know what? Don't panic. Don't panic, because it's lovely down here. It's lovely, dark, and warm. And all this week, we have been feeding and looking after the lovely author Alis Hawkins. Haven't we, Lisa? We have been feeding her, right?
We have. I have been taking very good care of her. Haven't been doing anything with this at all.
Alice, talk to me.
Help, please, let me out.
Not yet, because we made a promise that you were going to judge our true crime between our two armies.
It's the only thing that's been keeping me going all week. That knowledge that I'm going to judge the crime off.
Crime off.
That's a great name. Now we need a theme tune for that as well, because I still want to know how Alice, what rabbit holes you went down to get the Skeleton Army chance.
Oh, so first of all, I had to look at what musical tunes there were at the time, and two which I used were Champagne Charlie and Pop Goes the Weasel. And do you know Pop Goes the Weasel? Half a pound of tuppenny rice, half a pound of treacle. That's the way the money goes. Pop goes the weasel. So that turns out to be about pawning your possessions to buy food, because pop was to pawn
in today's Britain.
Yeah, 100%. That's all about people being really, really poor and pawning their possessions. And then Champagne Charlie, obviously, was a great one for the Salvation Army to choose, because they were taking the message that, oh, isn't alcohol great, and kind of subverting it by putting new words to it. So they had a hymn which was particularly written, I think, for the Band of Hope, which was a children's temperance organisation, which was called He's a Fine Young Man, which is all about a young man who's given up drinking, and they set that to the tune of Champagne Charlie. So that was one rabbit hole I went down. Another one was having to look up actual Salvation Army hymns, and that took me quite a while, because there are lots of Salvation Army hymn books online, but they're mostly too late. You know, they were published after 1890, or even in the 20th century. So it's quite difficult to find hymns which they were singing in the early 1880s, which is when I'm writing about, because I do like to get my facts right. You know, and because if you don't, and somebody spots that you've made a mistake, then why would they believe in anything else you've written? So I really, really believe in getting my facts right.
Exactly. And also it adds, you're creating fiction, but you've got to have facts to kind of hang it on. It's got to be the skeleton, hasn't it? Of your
Absolutely.
book has to be the facts that you can hang that flesh on, and that's getting dark. Let's get on before I start talking about cooking people like we did the last time.
Obviously, you're down here in a crowded rabbit hole with us. Or I don't say that. There's plenty of space down here. But is it quite a lonely thing when your rabbit holes are perhaps really history-based, rather than, because we've heard from other authors who will go out and talk to people and talk to different people in different professions and things like that?
I mean, it massively helps being an introvert. Because I don't mind my own company. And also, a lot of the research I do, as I think I mentioned in the previous episode, I do in local newspapers, and I can just hear people talking to me through these newspapers, particularly the letters that people used to send in. I mean, they are such a great source of what were people thinking then, what were they doing, what was preoccupying them. And it's all the same stuff as now, honestly. It's just quite astonishing. You could publish any of the letters that I was reading, a couple of months ago for the Skeleton Army, and, tidy them up a bit in terms of, people being a bit more posh and respectful in those days. But the sentiments are exactly, what's happening now. Dogs fouling pavements, potholes, noisy neighbours, corruption in local government. Why isn't the council doing what we want? Why is the council doing what they want? All this kind of stuff. So that's another rabbit hole that I went down, and there are so many people there that I don't feel lonely. And I do have to go and see places, because Google Maps is great, but a lot of Oxford is very, very different to how it used to be then. So I've got an old map of Oxford. I've got it's a fantastic resource, actually. It's produced by one of the Scottish universities. Let me just quickly flick over and see if I can find which one of the Scottish universities it is. And it superimposes old previous maps of different towns on current OS maps. So I can look at a bit of Oxford as it is now, and then flick over to an 1870s map and think, oh, look how different it was then. So yes, the National Library of Scotland.
Oh, was it? I was going to bet it was Strathclyde for some reason. It's always Strathclyde. I don't know why.
My money would have been on St Andrews.
Right, well, I'm sure both those wonderful Augusta institutions have contributed to the National Library. Yeah.
So as we're now in a competitive mode, Lisa, let's do the true crime off. I've been looking forward to this.
Oh, I feel like you've done more research than me. Pull in Pod Lisa. Pod Lisa, come back.
Alice, who do you want to go first? You choose.
Okay, given that Nikki introduced this episode, let's have Nikki first.
Okay, so Alice, I'm going to take you back to 1946 for the Red Riding Hood murder.
Okay.
Have you heard about this one?
Oh, this is the Murder in the Wood?
The Murder in the Wood. The poor little 12-year-old Muriel Drinkwater. This is all about. Now, I liked this one because I don't like it, but I jumped down a massive rabbit hole for it because there are a lot of updates with this case that have happened through the years, but it's still, and I know this will upset Lisa, it's very much still unsolved.
Oh, I'm glad I didn't do that one.
Yeah, you don't like an unsolved one.
No.
See, I do. I enjoy the not knowing. So, Muriel Drinkwater was this lovely little girl. She was actually known by everyone called the Nightingale because she would dance and sing everywhere. She just sounded like this amazing little angel. And she was only literally a few feet from her home, and she'd wave to her mum, and then she disappeared. Gone. And a couple of days later, her body was found in the woods. And I'm not going to talk about what the guy did to her, what the murderer did. We don't really go into the gruesome facts of cases because I think we're gruesome enough, aren't we, Lisa? We don't need any extra. And also, I don't want to give power to to whoever did it by detailing anything, but it was not pleasant at all. It was a horrible end for a beautiful child. It was called the Red Riding Hood murder because it was in the woods. She was actually in a blue Macintosh, apparently, rather than a red cape, as you can imagine. And through the years, a few bits and bobs came out. Some DNA was found on that blue Macintosh, which they actually did a very limited, we've talked about genetics, forensic genealogy in the past. They did a very limited search, the kind of limited search that they can do in the UK. They didn't find any matches. However, they did exonerate someone who had a shadow over them for many, many years, that he had done it. So at least they exonerated some poor guy from it. Also, and this came out in a TV program that I watched about it. I can't find much else online, so as to the research, but apparently a local charity shop, which I'd like to say could be at the Salvation Army shop, probably not, but that would have been amazing if it had been. They found a book, an old children's book that had Muriel Drinkwater's name and a dedication, and had a bookmark with her name on that she made at Easter.
Oh.
And that was in her bag when she was murdered. So clearly the murderer took it as a trophy. And then when he died, I'm assuming he died, moved away, whatever. I would say he died. They want to keep these trophies while they're alive. With the book, it was clearly something that had been taken by the murderer and then donated perhaps on his death. But of course, there was no records to say where it was donated from or what happened. And can you imagine, it was the person that bought that then looked inside. They were collecting old children's books. They looked inside. They looked the name up, which you'd go down that rabbit hole quite quickly, wouldn't you? And then they discovered the case.
Oh, that's quite a good way to dispose of stuff, isn't it? Like trophies and things. Nobody cares.
I have that in The Brother, where he disposes of his gloves to charity shops because it just tickles him inside that someone is using, something he murdered someone with. But yeah, so that's my case, Alice, the Red Riding Hood murder.
Okay. Yeah.
Lisa?
Oh, have I just got to go? Should I proper go into storytelling mode like you did? I mean,
it's up to you.
Let me take you back to to the great past of 1976. imagine folks in the flares, in their flares,
And their love
across
beads.
the Welsh hills with their sheep, going to. Mine might not go as well. Let's try. Going to the Red Gables Hotel. Now, I already think it sounds a little bit on the creepy
It
side.
does.
It probably didn't before this came out. But yes, to the Red Gables Hotel, where you have a gardener and handyman called Neil Rutherford. Now, Neil Rutherford was formerly a submarine commander and had a fairly decorated history in the Navy. He had a distinguished record, was what I've written down in my notes here. Don't know what told me that, but he had a distinguished record in the Navy, and he was a former submarine commander. I think he left the Navy about 10, maybe a bit longer years previously. I haven't written down that number. And he'd had a little bit of a kind of downward spiral since then. So 4 years prior to September 24th, 1976, which is when the tragedy at the Red Gables Hotel occurred, he had split up from his wife. They'd got divorced. And then very recently, he had lost his job at the Red Gables Hotel. So I kind of think... and I'm not giving any sympathy here to Neil Rutherford, but he'd had, as we have talked about actually with a few other kind of cases, he had these sort of inciting incidents that life was on a little bit of a downward spiral for him. He left his career in the Navy, and I don't know how that feels for ex-servicemen. I'm not done service in any kind of army or navy myself, but it feels like a little bit of a huge difference to come from being a commander of a submarine to then working as a handyman and gardener. And nothing against handymen or gardeners, it's an important job and a fabulous job, but I kind of think it must have felt for him like, well, just really different, like a real difference. And also I think it's probably quite a lonely job as well, potentially. So he might have well had some real sense of camaraderie when he was in the Navy that he'd lost. And then there was something going on, a bit of a downward spiral. He'd split up from his wife, and then he'd lost his job. And the person who had told him to leave the hotel was Linda Simcox. She's the hotel owner. And on September 24th, 1976, unfortunately, Neil Rutherford took a firearm and he went into the hotel and he killed Linda. He killed Linda's daughter, Lorna. He killed Lorna's husband, Alistair McIntyre. And then he also killed, and I don't mean to bring any humour here, but this really feels like this guy was in the wrong place at the wrong time, like the ultimate definition of wrong place at wrong time. Johnny Gore Green, who was the only guest at the time in the hotel.
Oh, no.
Which part of me wonders, like, how many rooms were in this hotel? But they only had one guest at the time. And he was actually an antiques dealer who was actually resident of Baton Rouge in Louisiana. So I don't know what kind of holiday or working holiday that he was on that ended him up in Wales at the Red Gables Hotel. I don't know if when he arrived, somebody said, "I'm sorry, but this is a local place for local people." No. And unfortunately, it did not end well because he was also shot by Rutherford, and then Rutherford shot himself. And there are a few question marks around this. There are also a few theories. So one of the theories is that Rutherford was actually in love with Linda and that she didn't reciprocate his feelings. There was some talk about whether he was disgruntled by having been sacked. He was described by a local inn owner as being a quiet man who came every night and had half a Guinness, but also as a fidgety man, and that he'd kind of have his Guinness, half a Guinness, he'd be in the pub for 30 minutes and then he'd leave, but he was a bit fidgety. And that particular night, he'd been pacing.
I don't think having half a Guinness and being fidgety amounts to evidence against someone.
I think he had two halves.
Oh, 2 halves.
He had
hang
two halves
hang
that
on.
night.
Yeah, definitely. He did it.
which makes a
Makes
pint.
a point. Yeah.
But I think he
You
had it
would
in two
know,
halves.
Skellington Army, Lisa.
I'm a skelly. Oh, skelly army, skelly army. So I don't know if maybe he's suffering from some sort of PTSD or something like that. And there was talk, yeah, has he, had his nose put out of joint, he's out of his job, maybe it's kind of the final straw and he just cracks and goes in and does this. But what's really odd is everybody was found. So this hotel was over 3 floors, and everybody was found on a different floor across the 3. And that Rutherford was found with Linda, I think, on the 3rd floor, but I might have that room. But they were found together.
Was Linda married?
I don't know. I didn't find that in my research. I'm assuming, she must have. She's had a daughter. So unless she'd adopted that daughter or chosen to have a child on her own at some point, which I'm not sure she would have done in the 1960s. So daughter, Lorna was 24 at the time.
So they're only assuming, because I'm assuming back then that the kind of the I suppose the gun ballistics and that weren't great.
Yeah, and he had it in his hand. He was found
you
with the gun in
can
his
kill
hand.
someone and put a gun in their hand.
Exactly.
Yes. So I don't know. And it is odd. So I think I'm not sure if it was Alistair or Johnny was actually found outside the building. So they have kind of going a little bit down a rabbit hole like you, Alice. They have accounts of the first people on the scene when you kind of go searching online, and it's their voices. So it's them describing as fidgety and having half a Guinness is the landlord of the pub. But they described finding a man outside still alive. But he'd kind of dragged himself out, whether he dragged himself out from the house or whether he'd been shot down there. But how do you manage to shoot 4 people on 3 different levels of a house and not in any way kind of, if you went and did one, then surely the others will hear something is amiss. Would it be that they just, that Johnny's in his room, he's having a look at some antiques he's picked up that day, thinking about traveling home, and he walks out, he goes, oh, what's that noise? Walks out his room. But surely you would be on edge. You would be waiting to run.
Well, I mean, in the not to kind of shoehorn in my case again, Alice, but in the Muriel Drinkwater case, she was shot. Yeah, she was shot. No one heard the shot because it was muffled against the coat. But also, it was said that shots rang out across Wales quite often with poachers in the woods and people so it wasn't kind of a suspicious sound by any stretch. So that could be the same there.
But that's inside a building, though. Is it going to have a different quality of sound if it's contained within the walls of a building? It's going to echo.
I don't know.
That's not a very good echo.
That was a terrible echo noise.
Ba-bang.
I think you should, Alice, take
Ba-bang,
points
ba-bang,
off
ba-bang.
Lisa for their terrible echo noise.
No, terrible. Oh, I've had some good sound effects, but they were not my best.
Okay, so Alice, have you heard of the Red Gables case?
I have not. No. Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Lisa, how old was Rutherford?
50. Oh, am I right? I think he was 55, but that might be Johnny.
Well, if he was 55, then he would have been in the war. So that I'm going to go with Nicky's suggestion of PTSD, and that would also account for the twitchiness and the jumpiness. So, and also, I mean, I think if he killed whoever was outside first, I think maybe everybody else ran inside, out of the way, and he just went from floor to floor, picking them off, and ended up on the 3rd floor and killed her and then killed himself.
I still don't think. I mean, timing wise, yeah. What are the odds that the object of his affection is the last one to die? I'm just thinking, and he dies with her. I know that officially the case is officially closed, isn't it, Lisa?
It is. This is a solved one.
This is a solved one. I still don't buy it. I'm not buying what they're selling.
I think I'd have to do a little bit. There might be a red rabbit hole following this that I go down around the development of ballistics and the skills of ballistics.
Yes.
And what we know now that we didn't know in 1976, and whether that would change anything. Because he sounds like a good scapegoat. If we've got him being fidgety in the pub.
Yeah, he does.
He'd just been sacked. But and there must have been some behaviour that had led to him being sacked. Because I don't think, and you know what, I did look at dates, but I've not got them now. But I think he'd been working there for a while. Like he'd left the Navy years before, and he hadn't had other roles, so he'd been kind of the gardener and handyman there for quite some time.
Right.
So there must have been something that prompted them to dismiss him.
Yeah. And again, that might play into some kind of mental problem, because you don't leave the Navy being a commander and then go into being a handyman and a gardener, with the greatest respect to handymen and gardeners, if there's not something wrong with you. You go and do something much more high powered and better paid, don't you?
But then there's like, you do get, so somebody told me a lot of people who come over who are maybe refugees, who might be escaping warfare and stuff, and they'll be professors and astro engineers and things like that. But but when they, you know, go to a safe place, when they seek asylum, they won't be able to get a job. And they'll have to seek a job as, you know, a taxi driver. And again, no disrespect to taxi drivers.
Presumably Rutherford was British, was he?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily work there. Intriguing. Well, yeah.
We have presented you, Alice, with 2 historical Welsh true crime cases.
Yeah.
Which are you writing your next book on?
Yes, that's what I was going to ask.
Were you?
Which one intrigued you the most?
I need to ask a question. I know that the Red Riding Hood one was near Swansea, so that's in South Wales. Where was the Red Gables?
I don't know. Hang on. Sorry. Pod Lisa failed. Didn't do enough research on this one.
Because you may not know this about Welsh people, but we have a north-south divide.
Oh, well, I might have to spell it out for you, because I'm not entirely sure I can say it, Alice. The now demolished Red Gables Hotel in Penmanwah. Yeah. Sorry, I'm from Essex, and I do describe myself as having a bit of an Essex deficit when it comes to any kind of trying to speak differently.
So Penmanwah is in North Wales. So as a South Walian, well, I'm from West Wales, but I'm definitely from the southern half. So I'm predisposed to want to go with the Red Riding Hood murder. But also, if I was going to write either of them, I would write that one. Definitely, the Red Riding Hood murder, because it's much less explicable. There's going to be many more characters that you can bring in. There's going to be loads of red herrings that you can put in there. I mean, like, where did the gun come from? She was a farm kid. You know, there was some suspicion that it had been left behind by GI in the war.
It was left behind. The gun was left behind, but they did do some ballistics, and it was tracked back to a couple of other crimes as well beforehand.
That's another great rabbit hole you can go down as well. So you can do all sorts of flashbacks to the murderer and his time in the war and all this. So I'm definitely having that one.
Hey, there you go.
Sorry, Lisa.
One again. All right, it's fine. Don't worry. You thought you were leaving today. But, I'm just getting out some more tape.
Well, I'm not gonna allow that, Alice. You are allowed to get out. You had a guest pass to the Red Rabbit Hole, so you are welcome back anytime, so we can discuss more about all the different. Well, I was very intrigued when you said about the Black Death.
Yes. Yeah,
so maybe we can talk medieval murder mysteries at some point as well.
I love that. Yeah, no, that'd be good. I love that book that I wrote. It's called The Black and the White. Not available in bookshops. It's currently with an ebook only publisher, so it's only available on Amazon. But yeah, I did huge amounts of research for that book, including research where we now live. We used to live in Canterbury. Now we live in the Forest of Dean, and I came to the Forest of Dean to do some research. I just went down that rabbit hole and came across the country, and now we ended up living here, and we run the charcoal burn that I came to observe to see how burning was done, because for some reason I have never understood. I wanted my main character to be a charcoal burner. Don't ask me why, because I do not know. But yeah, so there are 2 historical reconstructions of medieval charcoal burning techniques that happen in the country, and one of them happens right here in the Forest of Dean, and me and my partner Edwina run.
Wow! And what? Just for listeners who don't know, and me, is charcoal burning like what it says on the tin, as in burning?
It's making charcoal.
For sort of artwork?
No. So before we discovered mineral coal, all smelting of metal was done with charcoal because you can't burn ordinary wood hot enough to melt metal. And charcoal burns 3 times hotter than non-charcoal wood. It's not as hot as mineral coal, but it will do. And so without charcoal, no industrial revolution. I mean, not even Bronze Age and Iron Age, but certainly no industrial revolution, because they developed the blast furnace before they discovered that you could burn mineral coal in blast furnaces.
Wow. And is it how do you do it? Do you follow the original process and just literally burn wood to turn it to coal, or does it have to be contained?
It's a bit more complicated than just burning. So you have to, you form a stack of wood. So you start off with a chimney made out of wood. So you put 2 battens one way, 2 battens at right angles, and then carry on going up to make a chimney which stops at about 5'6". And then you surround that by ever increasing concentric circles of wood, battens of wood, which are about 3 foot long. And then you pile another lot of battens on top of that. So it's a very, very tidy stack. And what you're trying to do is put the battens of wood close together, so there's very little room for movement. Because once you set fire to it, which you do by pouring embers into that central chimney and setting, and making sure that fire is roaring, you then cap it off. The stack is covered in back in the day, it would have been covered in gorse or hay or bracken, and then sealed more or less with riddled earth.
Ooh, riddled earth. I think that's what the rabbit warren's made of, riddled earth.
Yeah, there you go. So what you're trying to do is you're trying to regulate how much air gets into the stack, because if it literally bursts into flames, all you get is ash. What you want is the fire. You want glowing embers to pass the glow from one to another, so that you drive off all the water in the wood and the coal tars in the wood, everything which isn't carbon. So you're aiming for pure carbon at the end. And as the wood dries out and all these other things are driven off, it shrinks. And the more gaps you've got, the more likely you are to have a stack collapse. And once it collapses into the central fire, it will then go up in flames. So the stack has to be watched for the whole time it's burning. I mean, we, as the demonstration one, we do a very small one. It's only a couple of tons of wood. So it's about 10 foot in diameter. Back in the medieval period, it would have been 5, 6, 7 times as big. And they would burn all week. We burn ours over a weekend. So we started to say, so we have 2 people on duty at all times. So we have 8-hour shifts. So we need a lot of volunteers to run the charcoal burn.
There is part of me that thinking that could be like some sort of crime scene in a medieval. Somebody's in the stack and you don't know, and then somebody goes, "Oh, it's spoiled. It's not worked. What's happened to this?" And reveal.
Yeah, no, 100%.
This is why I don't write novels. That was
So I hate to say it, ladies, but it's time again.
Can I just say one thing? It's not about my work. It's about a Welsh true crime thing. I've recently heard an amazing BBC Sounds podcast about the most famous Welsh murder, which was a huge miscarriage of justice, the Lynette White murder in 1988, which the South Wales police fitted up 5 black and Asian men for the murder. They absolutely made up evidence. They made people give false testimony, and they were put on trial. The police were subsequently put on trial, and that was also a miscarriage of justice. So it's called Shreds. It's on BBC Sounds, and it is brilliant. I'm not particularly into true crime podcasts, but I was riveted by that.
But you love this one though, Alice, right?
Oh, this is brilliant. This is actually a match.
I think if Alice is up for it, we should have her back. We should talk medieval murder mysteries and the Lynette White case, because I've heard of that one as well, and it is fascinating.
I would love that. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Excellent. So, Alice, before you go, let us know, what are you working on at the moment?
I'm working on the third in the Oxford Mysteries currently, which is all about the university's attitude to young women and prostitution, and how they tried to sort of stamp it out without punishing the boys. They only punished the young women.
Not much has changed there, I'm afraid. So this is goodbye from the Salvation Army, Nikki.
And goodbye from Skeleton Lisa. Bring back drinking.
Thank you, listeners, for being with us again. And thank you, Alis Hawkins. And do remember to pick up all her books, especially the audio books that are on BorrowBox and in the libraries and can be bought through Audible.
If you're looking for a singer for the ditties, I'm available.
Don't fall for her drinking ditties, Alice.
Ooh, cider.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been such fun.
It's an absolute pleasure. And remember, listeners, to follow the Red Rabbit on social media. We're on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook.
If you search the Red Rabbit Hole podcast, you will find us. We are at the Red Rabbit Hole podcast. Please come and follow and listen. You get little sound bites early on TikTok. And if I get enough followers, I can put a link on there, apparently. So that's what I've heard. So I need more followers, please.
And we've got a Patreon page that has bonus material if you want to be a member. And also you get the next episode a week before everybody else as well, in case you're chomping at the bit and want to listen to the madness that we have created.
Of course you will.
Of course.
And you'll get a photo in the gallery that I'm making. Yeah, I'm going to create a gallery, a gallery on the wall in the rabbit hole with all the pictures. We're going to have a gallery.
You and your memorabilia
of all of our Patreons. Yeah. The only thing, it'd be a problem if we have like an influx.
I know, that's your job.
Digging for years to make this tunnel long enough for the gallery.
Thank you very much, Alice, for being here with us again. We loved having you here.
Absolutely.
Goodbye, everybody. We'll see you soon.
See you soon.